So welcome. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about the GRE, and we're going to be looking at specifically the reading comprehension, although I am going to mention a few things about the writing and the vocab section, part of the reading, part of the verbal section as well. My name is Doug. I am the staff advisor and the test prep specialist for the HPA. Welcome for everyone coming here. So let me tell you a little bit about what these programs are and what they're not. So these programs, we're talking mostly about strategy, just because going through the entirety of the content of a test like this is not really possible in a 6-week period. And so we're doing 6 of these sessions. So today we're going to be doing the reading comprehension section or the verbal section, and that's it. We're not going to touch that anymore because for most of you guys, I'm assuming most of you guys are HPA students, which means you're going into a health career. The verbal section really isn't that important. If you do need assistance on the rest of the verbal section, unfortunately, that's not what we're here for. We're here going to be spending most of our time on the quantitative section. So without further ado, let's get into it. So the first thing you got to know about any test is understand its structure. So the GRE is about a 4-hour long test. And how many people here have taken a practice test before? So I've got 2 people answering, but with 14 people here, make sure I know how many people have taken the test. Oh, you guys are using the, never mind, I see it now. You guys are using the emoticons. I had to open up my participants window. I didn't have that open. So it looks like, let me ask that question again. How many people here have taken a practice test before? I didn't see the answers if you were using the thumbs up stuff. So it looks like a handful. For those of you who have not taken a practice test yet, I want to encourage you to take a practice test. There's free practice tests all over the place. You can actually take one with us on the 24th of July. We'll be doing signups. I'll have that in the notes at the end. But get to know your test by doing lots of practice tests. The thing starts off with 60 minutes of essays, 2 essays, 30 minutes each. Then you get a verbal and a quant section. Maybe not in that order. It might go quant verbal. It just depends. Then you get a break, and then you get another verbal and a quant. Again, you don't know the order. It might go quant verbal. And then you'll get another section, which may or may not, which may be quant, it may be verbal, or may be identified as what they call the research section. At some point, if you don't have a research section, you'll have one section that is actually experimental, and they do not identify it. So you will get 3 quants and 2 verbals, or you'll get 2 quants and 3 verbals, or you'll get 2 quants, 2 verbals, and a research section. So it's hard to tell. You can't really bank on how any of that's going to play out. So you shouldn't make any or like believe that you're going to know what test you're going to have before you get it. This is something you're going to have to discover as you go. This is also what's referred to as a adaptive test, which means it will adjust the difficulty based on your performance. However, it's adaptive by section rather than adaptive by question. So that means the first section's difficulty is set. It's going to be set at a medium difficulty. Then if you do poorly, you're going to be sent to a much easier section, and it's going to feel like a lot of the questions are softballs, and you're really not going to be able to beat the 150 mark on that section, on that subject. If you do okay, then you're going to get a second medium section, which means you're going to be around 150, a little bit above, a little bit below. And then finally, if you do really well on that first section, you're going to get brutalized in the next one. So honestly, what's the place you want to, where do you want to be in that second section? You want to be getting brutalized, or you want to have softballs? Should that second section be really, really hard or really, really easy to know that you're scoring well? It better be really, really hard. You better be getting brutalized on that one, because that means at least you're above a 150, which you're past the halfway mark. So you want to feel like the questions got harder. If it feels like they got easier, you got a problem on your hands. You'll probably end up needing to retake the test. That's about all you can predict from that, unfortunately, though. Since it's adaptive by section, there's not much else you can do to prepare. And the biggest problem is the experimental section doesn't count toward this. So if your experimental section was first, then you can't just bail on that section because it's experimental, because you won't know it's experimental. So you have to treat literally every section like it's your first section. So it's kind of annoying the way they set that up, but it is what it is. So not a lot of strategy can be gained by gaming the test that way. The first section is the essay section, which for most of you guys, getting above the 50th percentile is all you need to do. So if you can get a 4 on this section, because it's scored between 0 and 6, you just get a 4 or higher, you're good enough. To be honest, most schools aren't even going to care what your analytical writing section has. As long as you can write English, you're all good. Doesn't have to be the greatest writing in the world. In fact, sometimes better writing leads to a lower score, because the better you write, the more complicated the writing, which means the person reading the essay might have a harder time figuring out what you're saying, which may lead to a lower score overall. So I would say stick to just okay writing. Don't try to be stellar. Write a lot, but don't write really, really well, because it can actually backfire. And you have 2 types of essays, and this is all I'm going to say about them. I'm going to give you a formula for both the essays. The first essay is analyze an issue. They're basically going to say, blah, 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 here's some issue. Here, we're going to present some issue, and you need to pick a side. And in this essay, you're going to want basically 6 paragraphs. You want an intro, your 3 points that support or are cons of that of your side, and then give a counterpoint, and then go for a conclusion. It's a very basic essay structure. Now, I say pick a side. They want you to pick a side. Do not waffle. Do not go, well, this, and then this, but this other thing. Pick the side that you can write the most points on. It doesn't matter if you actually agree with your side. You could be totally in disagreement with your side, but if you can make more points, go that direction. This is not about writing something you believe in. They're not, these essays are never going to come back to haunt you. These essays are really going to be just, can you do the job? And that's all they're asking you to do. And the job is to support one side and then go like, there is the possibility that I may be wrong. That's the counterpoint, and then conclude. So go all in. And if you can't write a lot on one side, then pick the other side and write a lot about that side. Very basic structure. And then in general, write with this idea in mind: clear, consistent, and concise. Vary the sentence structure a little bit. Avoid passive, because that's not very concise. Avoid pronouns, because that's not very clear. And don't use contractions, because a lot of times we use contractions incorrectly, and it's just not formal writing. So that's what you do on this essay. The next essay is very much the same, except you're analyzing an argument. So they're going to make some argument, like company A wants or notices that they're not selling this product, but company B sells this product, and this is the way company B advertises. Therefore, company A will use that same advertising technique. That's their argument. But what you're really supposed to do is say, what are the assumptions in this argument? So basically, I want you to tear it a new one. You're going to go in there and say, what are all the things that are wrong about what they argue? And can anybody identify anything wrong with the argument I just outlined? Company A isn't selling a product. Company B is selling the product, and they use this type of advertising. Company A will use the same advertising and therefore sell more product. What are some flaws in that logic? Yeah, maybe that's not why company B is selling the product at all. What else? What are some other flaws in that logic? Do you know where company B is located? What country they're in? But it may be hard to distinguish. I would say you want to distinguish the companies, in fact. like say, is company A in America and company B in China, then it's not going to work the same way, is it? Because they're in different places. All kinds of flaws with that type of logic. And you just got to practice tearing logic apart. That's your job on these essays. Keep it simple, intro, first, second, third flaw, conclusion, and call it a day. Again, stick with the same idea of writing clear, consistent, and concise. And I know that was a fast forward route through these, but these are the formulas and they will get you the score you want. So when you're doing practice tests, if you're doing some of those practice tests that have essays and they do get graded, which some companies will actually do that, then stick to this formula and you will get a strong score on your essay. You're going to get a 4 or higher, and that's all you need. Any questions on the 2 essays and what to expect when it comes to the essays? So there's certain length of a paragraph expected. No, but there's no like word counts or anything like that. But I would try to write as much as you can in 30 minutes. You basically want to be writing the entire time. I would suggest this. Plan out your essay. Take about 5 minutes of the 30 to plan out your essay and then write for 25. And just in case this comes up, no, you don't get cut and paste. No, you don't get find. There's 0 editing tools. So if you're going to move stuff around, you've got to move it manually, which is not an easy thing to do. So that's why you want to do that planning period on your essay. Give yourself 5 minutes to plan and then 25 minutes to write. Length, just more length is always better. I think it's the word for that. Any other questions on the essays? And again, the reason why I spend so little time on essays is because as a whole, most of you, the essay will be irrelevant to your assessment. Like, how many people here are pre-vet or pre-PA or even pre-nursing? Only one person's pre-PA, pre-vet, or pre-nursing? What are you guys going to? Where are you guys heading? That's actually a good question, so I can get a feel of the audience. What is your future plan? Why are you taking the GRE? While you're answering that question, are there topics we will be familiar with? They may not be topics you're familiar with. You don't have to be familiar with them because they'll give you enough background to deal with it. So you don't have to be familiar with it. You can be even just subtly familiar with it, and you still should be able to write these things. So I've got a couple pre-vets chemistry, but seriously, I'm asking, what majors are you guys going to go into? What programs, so I can get a feel for it? So we've got some people from outside the HPA coming in to do this program today. That's what I'm seeing. That's okay. That's all right. More the merrier. So I will say for you people in the chemistry, the biomedical engineering, things like that, it's going to be likewise. The verbal section is not going to be as important for you guys. The quantitative section will be the more important section. So the essay, again, 4+ stands for you guys as well. So this is good for me to know, is that I've got quite a few that are not in future health careers here. So I've always got to keep that in mind with what I'm saying. All right. So next would come the verbal reasoning section, which you're going to get 20 questions on each time you see a verbal reasoning section. And half of those questions, give or take, are going to be what are called text completion and sentence equivalents, which we're not going to cover those in any great detail. We're going to spend the rest of our time today on the reading comprehension, which is about another half of the questions. You get 30 minutes to do these 20 questions, which means you got about 1.5 minutes per question. On this section, your score target is going to be around a 60th percentile or above, which is a 153 plus, give or take. Different years can vary. Now, I'm talking specifically for pre-vets, pre-farms, pre-PAs, the schools and the health careers that want this. For you guys that are not in those health careers, this score target may not be accurate. And actually, even for those in the future health careers, I would say you want to check with the schools to which you are applying to know what targets they have for you. But as a whole, the verbal section is not the important one. I can say for you pre-vets, UC Davis isn't going to look at your verbal score. All they care about is your quant score. Other schools, they just want to know that it's over a certain percentile. That usually being around 60th percentile. So that's what you're shooting for here. Just get it above 150. When it comes to the text completion and the sentence completion, the text completion and the sentence equivalence, those questions, there's a couple strategies that you might try here. Fill in the blanks with your own words before you look at the answer choices. And I know this is hard to do, but what most of these questions look like is they're just a list of vocab words. And you need to go into those list of vocab words and pick the correct vocab word or words. Sometimes it's more than one answer. The mistake I see a lot of people doing is they look at the answers, which taints you. Cover up the answers. So I know you can't just like put your hand over it, but like avert your field of vision or whatever, and just go to what the sentence is or the paragraph is that you're trying to complete, and pick your own words first before you look at the words that are there. And by doing that, you're less likely to fall into the traps, because a lot of times certain pairs of words are synonyms and those look really good, but they don't fit the spirit of the sentence. Read the sentence, fill in the blanks here first before you go ahead and pick the answers. The other trick with these questions is read the entire piece, like the sentence or the paragraph, with each answer choice. If you're struggling between a couple, see what sounds better, because sometimes just by sound you can figure out what works. But overall, on the text completion and the sentence equivalence questions, this is all vocab. And this is why there's not much for me to say here, because this is all vocab acquisition. So if you guys want to get better at these questions, you need to develop a stronger vocabulary. And there's many GRE vocab apps out there, or GRE vocab lists out there. It honestly doesn't matter which one you use, because just building your vocab is important. I would start adding in 10 words a day through your entire GRE studying, so that like by the time you're done, you've incorporated another 500 words into your vocabulary. That would be a good strategy for improving on the verbal or on the text completion and sentence equivalence problems. Outside of that, there's not a lot of tricks to this stuff. It's do you know what the words mean? So if you like, to give you an example, does anybody here know what the word salubrious means? S-A-L-B-R-I-O-U-S, salubrious. That's what I think I spelled it right. S-A-L-U-B-R-I-O-U-S, salubrious. No, I didn't think so. I never knew what that word meant until I saw it on my GRE the first time. So it's that level of word. You got to build that vocab. So how many people here are good at building vocab? Like vocab? Word of the day, toilet paper. Chelsea likes the vocab. It can be hard. It can be difficult to get yourself motivated to do vocabulary testing, but it is what the GRE wants you to have. And that's why I really think a lot of the schools really don't care so much about the verbal, because a lot of it's just, do you know a lot of fancy words? And that doesn't make you necessarily smart or anything. It just means you're good at remembering vocab words. So get working on the vocab now. That's the way you improve on the verbal section. Well, one of the ways you improve in the verbal section. The other part of the verbal section includes, oops, there we go, includes reading comprehension. And reading comprehension is what you think it is. This is what we're going to spend more time on today, because there's a little bit more we can do strategy-wise to improve upon this. The reading comprehension questions can vary from one sentence, literally one sentence, one question, to 3 paragraphs, 3 or 4 questions on it. So there's a lot of variability in the reading comprehension style of passage. But you can always expect one of these 5 major question types. Number 1, there will be questions that require you to get explicit information. They're basically looking for you to look at it, read it, and retrieve I always call it that, retrieve information. Then there's implicit information, the stuff that can be inferred from the passage or basically paraphrased. But either way, I actually refer to both of these types of questions, these explicit and implicit questions, as retrieval questions. Because what you're doing is you're going back to the passage and finding something it said. So you're retrieving that information. The next type of question is the tone or mood questions. The author wrote with what kind of tone? Another benefit of looking for the author's tone is to see, like, are these answers appropriate? If the author, like looking at this little blurb, would you say the author wrote with a positive, negative, or neutral tone in this paragraph? And tone can change based on where in the paragraph you read, but read that. What do you think? Positive, negative, or neutral tone? Got one vote for neutral. Got a vote for neutral going to kind of negative. What else? What do you guys think? This works best when you guys participate. I'd say overall, I would pull a neutral tone from this as well, because it's really him just talking about these popular elements and what makes something like what makes it pop versus classical. I actually thought, rather than it comes in a negative tone, that it actually ends in sort of a positive tone, because he says his music is not a version of popular music packaged to attract classical listeners. It is high art for listeners steeped in rock rather than the classics. High art, that's actually a kind of a positive term to say, like, yeah, this is like really good stuff. He's really saying these people really appreciate it because it's high art. So it sort of tweaked there at the end. But as a whole, this probably is writing a informative passage or a persuasive passage. Which one? Informative or persuasive? Probably more informative. And so see how the tone of the passage can actually answer the next kind of question, which is the purpose. The purpose of the passage is to inform the reader about elements of popular versus classical music. So tone informs the purpose, as opposed to main idea. What is the difference between main idea and purpose questions? What does purpose tell us? What does main idea tell us? You guys have any thoughts on that? If they're asking for the purpose versus asking for the main idea, what is the difference? So the main idea is the topic or the argument being given. I like that. I actually refer to it as the what of the passage. The main idea is the what of the passage. What is the purpose about? If I'm asked what the purpose is, what am I looking for? Yeah, it's the why. Why did the author write this passage? Was it trying to inform? Was it trying to convince me of something? Was it to make me lean one way or the other? Like, so we have to be careful, because a lot of times, and I see this happen with a lot of reading comprehension books, even for GRE books, is that purpose and main idea questions are lumped together as one thing, but they are in fact two very separate kinds of questions. You need to be thinking of a different task when you're asked a purpose question than you do when you're being asked a main idea question. You're being asked why for purpose, what for main idea. Now, what I try to do, and this is difficult a little bit in the GRE, since sometimes you don't get a lot of these questions. You don't get a lot of questions, so it can be hard to choose. But if I see explicit, implicit questions, I do those first, like right away, because those are just fact retrieval ones, and it's going to give me a better idea of what's in the passage. If there's a main idea and some explicit questions, I'm going for the explicit before the main idea. So I do a hierarchy through this. I go from the forest all the way to the trees, or actually I go to the trees all the way to the forest, actually, if I'm using my metaphor. Because what we tend to do is we tend to lose the forest for the trees. We look at all the details and we miss what the main idea is. But the details give us the main idea. So these more specific questions, these are the trees, start there. This is what we're good at, is with the trees. The forest was what we should do those last, because once we understand all the different details, we're more able to determine what the purpose is or the main idea is. So it's good to hold off on those kinds of questions. Now, if you have a passage that only has purpose questions and main idea questions, can I hold off on doing those? Nah, I'm gonna have to do them. So that's what I mean here. The GRE, sometimes you don't have a choice, because a passage at most is going to have 4 questions. If it's only a 1-question passage and it's a purpose question, you're going to have to just do that. But the nice thing is that in that case, the passage is shorter. So there's a scale difficulty to this. Now, the number of questions makes it more difficult, but you can get around that by doing the questions in a specific order, because you can, in fact, move backwards and forwards through the questions. You do not have to do the questions in order on the GRE. That's important. You can go forward, you can go backwards, you can actually skip around. Everybody with me so far? All righty. So we're going to try a few questions here with this passage. So this first question, the passage addresses which of the following issues related to Glass's use of popular elements in classical compositions? What kind of a question would you say this is? Is this a explicit or implicit or retrieval type question? Is this a tone question? Is this a purpose question? Or is this a main point question? Yeah, I would agree that this is explicit, implicit. It's saying which of these things was in the passage. The passage addresses which of the following issues. So if this is the first question I saw in the passage, I would do it. So I would read the passage carefully, but here's what I would do before I read the passage carefully. Look at the answer choices. I've got how it's regarded by listeners, how's it affected commercial success, revival of interest among other commercials, so a detrimental effect, or derivative inequality. So I'm uploading certain special words, and you can actually use a tool on the test to highlight. So you could highlight things like derivative. That's a fancy word that if I notice it in there, it might help. Or detrimental, revival, commercial, preference, maybe. That answer is not very unique. So then I'm going to go into here and I'm going to try to eliminate answer choices. So everybody take a minute to read this passage closely, see if you notice any of those terms. So now let's go through the answer choices one by one, and we're going to make some decisions. So here's what I want us to do is try to eliminate the answer choice. Don't pick it, but eliminate it. Use things like if it's an extreme answer, if it's even discussed in the passage. I usually refer to those as out of scope. If it's a reversal of what the passage is saying. Those are 3 very common ways to eliminate answer choices for GRE answers. So A, how it is regarded by listeners who prefer rock to the classics. Do we think this is an okay answer choice for this question? And why not? What would you say is the reason why you think this does not address this particular question? I think that's a pretty apropos way to get rid of it. It doesn't talk about the opinions of listeners. And that's what A is saying. That's an opinion of the listener. I would actually agree. I would call this an out of scope answer. The passage isn't really talking about the preferences. Now, it's a trap because we say his version is not a version of popular music packaged to track classical music. It's higher for listeners steeped in rock. But that he's saying it as a fact, not as a preference. A fact, not a preference. Out of scope. Nice call. How about B? How it has affected the commercial success of Glass's music? Is the passage addressing how it has affected the commercial success of Glass's music? So how might I eliminate this one if we don't feel that's the case? Is it too extreme? Is it out of scope? Or is it a reversal of what the passage is saying? It's out of scope. The passage is not discussing commercial success of the music. So we can say out of scope. It's not in there. So we can eliminate B. All right, how about C? Whether it's contributed to a revival of interest among other composers in using popular elements in their compositions. Keep it or get rid of it? I'm going to keep C or get rid of C. Ooh, we got some people that like it. Keep it. Why should I keep it? Revival is mentioned. Okay. It relates to it. So we'll keep it. We'll hang on to it. How about D? Whether it had a detrimental effect on Glass's reputation as a composer of classical music. Keep her to get rid of it. What might be a reason to get rid of it? I personally wouldn't go to a too extreme elimination on this one because it's not really saying like it's always detrimental. Like when we say extreme, we're talking about it's like it's always or it's never. Those types of really overt, no, like turning other options off. I can see why you might think that though. I think I would get rid of this one for a different reason. Why do you think we might get rid of this one? It doesn't say anywhere it's detrimental to him. In fact, he's kind of saying that he still seems to sell music. So yeah, I could go a reversal on this one, or I could even say out of scope. And we don't have to agree on why we're eliminating. We just got to eliminate it, right? So I would say personally out of scope. I could see the argument that it's reversal of what the passage is actually talking about. I think he's still saying class is successful. All right, and then we got E, whether it has caused a certain of Glass's works to be derivative in quality. Keep it or get rid of it. Okay, why keep it? it's distinctly his, I think is the phrasing of it. It's distinctly his, which here's a trap. Here's a total trap. Between C and E, I would totally keep it. Between C and E, which is the one we need to get rid of? So far, sorry guys. So far we're like 50-50. Now I want you to note something. C recycles language from the passage. Where is that? Where's the word revival? Where they're talking about Glass's use of popular elements, or where they're just talking about an intro to the paragraph? We're talking about that to the intro of the paragraph. E does not share any words in common with the paragraph, but where are they talking about his music being distinctly his? That's the bulk of the paragraph. So C is an answer that's drawing you to it because I like to call this recycled language. They're using a word that was in the passage, but in fact, it's not what this paragraph is saying about Philip Glass. It's just the introductory material. The passage is saying because Glass uses these things, he still has distinctively his own music. That's what's being addressed. E is our best answer. Ooh, that's tricky. So here's the big secret. Just because an answer has the same wording as something in the paragraph doesn't make it necessarily right. Just because an answer has the same wording as something in the paragraph or the passage doesn't make it necessarily right. No, you have to be careful of that. Because the paragraph or the passage isn't saying whether Glass's use contributed to the revival. He's saying there was a revival and Glass used popular elements. It's saying exactly the opposite. So C is incorrect because that's not what the paragraph said about it. It said the opposite thing. But E is correct because he used these popular elements, he is not being derivative, he is being distinct in his usage. Ooh, that's tricky. And that's the trickiness of the GRE. You can usually easily narrow it down, fairly easily narrow it down to two answer choices, but you really got to hone in on what the passage is actually saying. Questions on this one? So what are the four ways I've now introduced of ways to eliminate answer choices? Out of scope, recycled language, reversal, and too extreme. This is the list I use. You're more than welcome to come up with other elimination tactics, but I would encourage you all to generate your own way to eliminate answer choices on your reading comp passages. So let's look at another question. This is another type you might see where they say, consider each of the three and select all that apply. Sometimes the questions are multiple answer. So more than one could be correct here. Is this an explicit implicit? Is this a tone? Is this a main idea, or is this a purpose question? Explicit, implicit, tone, main idea, or purpose question. What kind of a question is this? Are they talking about tone in the answer choices, though? Yeah, I would say it's explicit, implicit. It's saying the passage suggests, that's usually an indicator of, hey, I would call this an implicit question because it's saying the passage suggests, that means the passage has it in it. Tone would be more like the author's tone. Like they would actually say the word author's tone, the author's opinion on that kind of a question. So this is an explicit, implicit question. I would definitely do this one next. So what do you think? A, does A apply to what they're saying about Glass's work? Does he show a return to the use of popular music in classical compositions? Keep it or get rid of it. I would agree. I think that's the premise of the paragraph, is they're talking about how Glass incorporated popular music back in his classical compositions. I would keep it. How about B? An attempt to elevate rock music to an artistic status more closely approximating that of classical music. Keep it or get rid of it. Why might I get rid of that one? Is it too extreme? Is it out of scope? Is it a reversal, or is it recycled language? So we got one person saying it's a reversal of the last part. I do think it's kind of a reversal. What they're saying is that, in fact, it's not trying to elevate rock music to artistic status. It has artistic status. He's just saying it is. It is high art for listeners steeped in rock. So I would call that a reversal. I would even say out of scope. Again, extreme would be if there's just shutting off any anything like it is. Rock music is an artistic thing more that approximates classical music. It's not using fudging language. Like an attempt makes it not as extreme. So reversal or out of scope, I think, is fair. How about C? A long-standing tendency to incorporate elements from two apparently disparate musical styles. Keep it or get rid of it. I would agree with keep it, because they're talking about like the first sentence. We're writing the practice of using popular elements in classical forms of approach in hibernation during in the United States during the 60s, but yet it's coming back, is what they're saying. The longstanding tendency to incorporate, so it's been around a while, and I would say classical music and popular music are disparate musical styles. Yeah, I would keep it. So what's our answer to this question? A and C. And here's what you have to be careful of, is you need to note this when you're attacking the question, is that sometimes the questions are select all that don't apply. Now, there's a visual trigger for this that I can't really reproduce easily on the slides, but when you're looking at these kinds of questions, the select one answer choice, the answer choices are circles, like you click a circle. When it shows all that apply, the answer choices are squares. So it's a little visual cue that you have that you're probably going to be selecting more than one answer when there's squares. You're only going to be selecting one answer when there's circles. So I have another passage here just in case we have time. So that's all we're going to spend on reading comp. And I know that's a fast walkthrough, but I just wanted to introduce you to a strategy that you can try to attack the questions. What's the strategy, basically? Do you pick the answer or do you eliminate bad answers? You pick the answer or eliminate bad answers. I want everybody to answer this one, because this is a huge point. Should you pick answers or eliminate answers? Eliminate, eliminate, eliminate. It's always easier to eliminate an answer choice than it is to pick the correct answer choice. Because when you're picking an answer choice, what tends to happen? You tend to fall into traps. And so if you're picking answer choices, you fall for the traps more easily. If you're eliminating, you're starting with a doubting Thomas idea, and you're more likely to avoid those traps. Everybody got it? All right, we'll open up to a few questions. I got about 5 minutes for questions here. Next week, or not next week, but the following week, we're going to talk about plugging in. We're going to learn our first big strategy for the quant section, which will make a lot of questions much easier plugging in is like a hugely easy way to make complicated questions simpler. And we're going to be doing that on July 14th. We are holding that mock exam, like I talked about, in July 24th. And we're going to have a follow-up session on July 29th. And I do drop-ins for test prep only Mondays from 8 to noon. However, next week we have the 4th of July holiday on the 5th, which is the Monday. And so we won't have those drop-ins next week. We will have them starting the following week. So I'll open the floor for questions if you have any. Thank you for coming today. The mock exam link will be on the test prep page, hba.ucdavis.edu/test prep. And the, what was I going to say? Oh, it's not ready yet. You're going to be able to sign up starting next week for that. It's going to place your uploading recordings. Yes, we'll be putting our recordings onto our YouTube page. So I'll give you the link once we get that up and loaded next week. And will study schedule session be recorded? Generally, I don't record those, but I can. It'd probably be best, Maddie, if you just do a drop-in or schedule an appointment, and I can help you with that. The drop-ins would be probably best because I think if I remember correctly, you're not one of our HBA people. You're like something else. So come to the drop-ins. That's fine. Any other questions? Those are all great questions. Thank you for coming tonight, guys. You rock the house.